from my home to your home. Back problems are an ever-pervasive issue in our society. We are on cell phones and computers, and we have this slouch posture. Taken also with the tension that the last couple of weeks have created, that even compounds it. So lengthening our spine will help with your back. Pulling your shoulders back will help to lengthen that spine, and creating a curve in your low back, not letting that low back sit against a chair will help. Taking your hands to your low back and helping to counteract the alignment of your spine by opening up your chest, be it sitting or standing, will help also to create that alignment. Also, just to add some gentle twisting with your spine. The movement's not coming with my shoulders, it's coming through my spine. The movement is small. The spinal muscles are small and only require a little bit of movement in order to activate them and get some heat into them and help them to heal. Also, because you're sitting, you might create an oppositional pull with the hip that you pull away from, feeling and engaging some of those pelvic muscles, just helping the whole area to warm up and to feel better. So this is a good thing to do several times a day. Each hour, waking up, can be done sitting or standing. The twisting I like to do sitting because your hips are stable. Just slow and controlled, and just focus in on that spine, doing the twist, using your hands on your knees to support a little bit of the movement. So this in and of itself is one component of what you can do for your back. But now I'm going to take you to the mat and do some exercises on the mat that also will help with your low back. Do them in addition to or in and of by themselves. The mat is a supportive environment for your back. You want to start with just again working on engaging those shoulders, and then doing in the Pilates world what we call as a warm-up. The purpose of this warm-up is to engage shoulders and core and to coordinate the breath with movement. So notice that I am always breathing and always moving, working on shoulder and core engagement. Breathing can be a very complicated process of Pilates. I generally just encourage people to breathe and to coordinate that breath with their movement. This move, however, I have an exhale as those arms go back overhead, getting the air out of the lungs and keeping the rib cage down and the spine long. My palms are facing towards me, which is natural shoulder alignment. My hands not going lower than the shoulder line. Notice as I lift my shoulders right there that I'm not coming up into a full crunch that we're all so familiar with, but I'm merely engaging the abdominals without compromising or changing the length of the spine. The movement is small. When you're doing any of this, you're going to focus on the movement pattern first and then add your breath. Notice how my abdominals are lifting my head. Placing my hands on my hip bones, I'm going to go into what we call knee sway. Knee sway is a movement about the hip oftentimes affecting your low back. You may feel that when you do this that you get a pull on one side of that hip. You should go to only comfort level, only moving within your range of motion as is comfortable, a good feeling of a stretch. Notice that my legs are not bringing them back, but that my hips and my core are bringing my legs back to center. You want the movement to come from your core. We're very good at using our legs, but this is about your hips. If you have one side that seems to need that stretch a whole lot, you're going to go and just do the one side and work on progressively maybe making the movement bigger. Your feel determining it. Bridge is another move, working on putting that low back into extension. You can make it small at first if you're sensitive to the move, repeating it at your own range of motion, and then maybe progressively as your back warms up, making it bigger. Do this move according to what feels good. There should be no pain involved. Hopefully, progressively, you'll be able to go a little higher until you really feel those glutes engaging behind you. Sciatic area is all about that glute area, and going higher engages the muscles of those glutes and helps to support that area. Again, sciatic area also radiating to the low back. So you can go up into that high sciatic area and then maybe lower just a little bit, which we'll do on the next one. Releasing the glutes and then maybe working on pelvic stability and the back of the legs, your hamstrings, a weak leg. Weak and tight hamstrings will contribute to low back problems. You can add a single leg extension, or you can add leg movement, changing legs when your supporting leg dictates. If you're doing this move, you should feel your hamstrings. If your hamstrings are very sensitive, you're going to bring your feet closer in to your glutes. If you're not feeling your hamstrings, you're going to bring your feet a little bit further away. We want to warm up and use those hamstrings. Notice how as I add the leg movement that my pelvis does not move. Or I can add a movement where I go down and up with those hips. Again, all good options, what feels best for you. Breathe with this. After you get comfortable with the movement pattern, add the breath. You might want to go back to a little bit faster knee sway just to work out anything that you've done. Taking a towel, again, the purpose of the towel is to engage your shoulder, placing it shoulder width apart. Just to protect that low back, you may lift one leg up and add that breathing exercise. Again, safer depending on what's going on with your low back. Maybe changing legs when you need to. You will feel your hip flexors, that groin area working. And if your low back is okay, you may bring both legs up and go back overhead. Again, developing strength in the core. Those lower pelvic muscles in the core are help to support your spine in the back and bring health. But don't do too much too soon. You should never feel your low back with this exercise. If you do, bring one foot down to the mat and do it with one foot. And then give yourselves a hug. Rolling to your side, we're going to go back into working with the hip. You want to stack your feet in line with your spine and your top hip on top of your bottom hip and lifting that leg up and down. You want to pause it at the furthest range to feel the engagement. Your hips should not allow you to move more than mine is moving. Again, give it a pause. That's the weakest link within those hip muscles. Again, working on developing strength. A hand on your hips helps to just bring another level of awareness of hip alignment. Notice how my leg lifts higher, but my hip is moving back. I'm exaggerating this move. Know that it can happen on a much smaller plane. Know that if your knee goes up too much, probably your hip is moving. So these are muscles in your glutes, very much connected to your low back. Again, we want to stretch and strengthen with them because they pull on your low back. You're going to roll to your back and take that leg up and bring it across, again to a level of comfort. Use that opposite arm to ground your shoulder blade and just stay here for as long as it feels good. And then we're going to repeat and do it on the other side. Again, stacking your hips, feet in a line with your spine, lifting it up, giving it a pause. Making sure that your head is comfortable, either by resting it on your arm as I'm doing, or using a towel or a pillow to give you that support. My neck is part of my spine, and there I go, I'm losing my alignment just a little, and see my knee goes up further. So you want to lift up just a little. Notice that your two sides will be different. Do you see that I have more range of motion on this side? What are you feeling? Again, then rolling to your back and crossing that leg over and just getting a nice stretch. Oppositional pull with that shoulder and turning that head will just feel good. And then again, maybe going into knee sways just a couple of times, just working out that area. Windshield wiper, bigger move than when your feet are on the floor, but the same. Notice that my core is bringing my legs back to center. It's slow and controlled. The oppositional pull is from my rib cage. Notice that my rib cage is not moving. Or actually, it's my shoulder blade is grounded on this one. The rib cage is when your feet are on the ground. So the shoulder blade is grounding given an oppositional pull. You'll also feel this in your shoulder if your shoulder's tight in the front area. A leg extension gives a wonderful stretch to that hip. But notice that as I extend that leg, my thighs are together. How much you extend that leg depends on you. So softening my knees a little bit if my legs out are straight. Finding the knee over my hip and circling that leg around. Leg movement with pelvic control. I'm going to look at that opposite hip, that my hip doesn't move. Circling the knee around my hip socket 6 to 8 times. If I'm feeling very stable, I'm going to move my arms up to the sky, challenging. The circle is about the size of a magic circle. Again, it will depend on us, on what's going on with our hip. But being able to, so that low leg is not my knee over my socket. We tend to do that. Make sure the knee is circling right over the hip socket. If you're doing this correctly, it's a pretty intense exercise in that groin area. While it doesn't look like it, you should be feeling it in the groin. Again, I'm looking at the movement of that opposite hip, or hopefully the lack of movement in that opposite hip. You want to do 6 to 8 rotations in either direction. The circle is about the size of a magic circle. You can absolutely have an option to do one leg with 8 repetitions and then switch to the other and then go back and do the other direction. Your groin area, your hip flexor, is very much the opposing muscle of that back and glute area and important to work. So stretching and then rolling to laying face down. Your hands are by your side, my toes are curled under. As I lift my shoulders, I'm going to lighten my thighs off that mat to help stabilize the low back. The movement with the shoulders is about length, not about height. Notice that about that mid-back area, the extension doesn't go any higher, but just there. Actually, looking at me in this move, I think I'm a little high. I don't often get to look at me. So there's where I'm going to say you're going to put your hands under and notice how that stabilizes, works my upper back without going too high to my lower back. Notice that every time that I lift, my legs are extending and I'm supporting that low back. Adding a twist will help work Again, more of those core muscles of those obliques. So bringing your hands by your side and coming up onto all fours. So going into a little yoga cat and cow and cat actually, just working that spine, getting the extension that we need, and then giving it the flexibility and the stretch that does feel good with cow. You're then going to lengthen that spine and sitting back, not rounding your back, but maintaining length of that spine. Reaching your arms out in front, pulling those elbows in, gives just a wonderful shoulder stretch. Bringing your hands underneath your hips and curling under your toes, just letting those knees lift up an inch. This causes guarding of the core, engagement of the core. You want to use your core and not your back, as shown right here. You want to keep that spine neutral and use that core. It's intense and small. Going into a bent-legged dog. Again, my focus here is length of my spine. Counteracting those activities of daily living, of our shoulders rounded and our low back rounded. Notice how my head lifts as I come down onto all fours. Your head being a very large weight affecting your spine. Your bent leg dog, shoulders permitting, determines how high up you go with those shoulders. Do a little or more. Come now on your knees. You may choose to put a pad underneath that knee, and you're going to rock forward and back. Notice that my knees are hip width apart so that I can get that back hip forward, getting a stretch in that back hip. Notice that my shoulders stay over my hips and not leaning forward. Holding it on the next one, just into that stretch, and reaching the same arm as the leg back and just getting a wonderful side bend. Oppositional pull out of that hip. And then again, twisting in just as we had done at the beginning of class. Changing legs. Again, my feet are hip width apart. My back hip is forward so that my hips are in alignment. The focus of this stretch is on my back hip. Again, pad your knee if your focus goes to that knee, supporting it with the weight bearing. I'm going to do a couple increasing range of motion and then adding that side bend, the same arm as the back leg, and just pulling down on that hip, getting a wonderful stretch, and then twisting in. I'm now kneeling, going to add some more of that back extension that we started sitting. This can be done kneeling, standing, sitting on a chair. Notice how my head goes back on that last one. You don't want to do that. You want to keep a natural curve in your neck, just gently looking up at the ceiling. My hands are supporting my low back and keeping it engaged. With my legs extended, I'm going to lift my hips up and back a little bit to create space. I want a curve in my low back, which means I may bend my knees. And leading with my chest, again, a long spine, I'm going to get a hamstring stretch. You can choose to straighten your legs a little bit more as long as you're feeling those hamstrings. We've rounded our backs for years doing this move, and you can do that a little, but better for the spine that you keep length. You'll be surprised at where you feel this stretch. You'll feel it in your tightest spots. So again, just going back, we started this twist to warm up the body, and we end it now after the body is warmed up, maybe giving it just a little bit more rotation, but that rotation again coming from the spine. The spinal rotators are small, the movement isn't big, but so important to get blood flowing into that back area to keep it healthy. Are you breathing? So it doesn't matter which way you breathe, just breathe with each movement, twisting in and then breathing the other way, twisting out. So rotator, an important shoulder muscle, and using a band or a towel, you want to bring that hand out in line with the elbow. Notice how my upper arm is staying by my side. My palm is up. Again, just helping to open that chest. While we're working the shoulder, this helps with spinal alignment. You want to give it a pause at that point out. That's the weakest link of that rotator cuff muscle. Sometimes it might help to put a towel underneath that forearm. We tend to love big movement, and that forearm, upper arm tends to leave our side. My elbow is forward a little bit, see that? This should be small and intense. The first couple that you won't feel, but then the more you do, you should begin to feel it either in your shoulder, if your shoulder is the issue, or in that mid-upper arm, which is your bicipital groove, which is the attachment of that rotator cuff muscle. Twisting again, but this time stretching over, reaching that front arm in front to just stretch out that rotator cuff. Oppositional pull to your hip. So here the spine is not compressing as it would be straight forward, but you're getting the side of your back. You don't want to lift that hip, but you want to keep it grounded, and you'll feel a wonderful stretch on the side. So again, reaching to get that rotator cuff and oppositional pull on that shoulder will get a stretch in the side of your back that will feel good. You should notice at this point that one side is tighter than the other. So on this next one, I want you to go back and do your tighter side and just give it a little bit more tension. Pause there and just breathe with it, allowing it to stretch out. Neck tension and keeping that head healthy is another one. Adding an oppositional pull with that arm works the muscles in both directions and gives you a much nicer stretch. And then tilting that chin down, again, just gets another set of neck muscles. So you're assisting a stretch by having your hand on your head, and you're working the muscle in both directions. Notice that my fingers are not lifting, I'm just gently pulling. Take a deep, or roll your shoulders forward and back. It should feel good. And then take a deep breath in and release it. Have a great day.